Hi, I'm Jen. This is the show where we read job postings a little too closely. On Roast the Post, we dig into the story behind the bullet points, and this one raises a few questions you'll want answered before hitting apply. Let's roast.
Hey everybody, we are doing a extra special bonus episode of Roast the Post today. Jen and I were chit-chatting, and she is writing a job post for something. And as we were talking about it, we kind of said to ourselves, it would be really cool if we unpack this live on the show and work through something that that we're collaborating on to give kind of more of a sense of how co-designing a role can add a lot to an organization that's really thinking about their talent management systems and practices. It's a bit of an experiment. It'll be a bit of a prototype. It'll be a little bit of fun, and I'm sure we're going to say some goofy stuff, so bear with us, but we hope you enjoy. We hope you find it useful. All right, Jen, why don't you get us into what the role is all about, and we'll just kind of start talking through it.
Absolutely. Okay, so the role itself is an executive assistant for a kind of impact-focused venture capital firm. A smaller firm, not too huge, portfolio of about 28 to 30 companies, and a leadership team of 6 and total headcount of about 12. So 50-50 leadership and employee count. For whatever reason, that's just the way that it has played out. And so the organization is just kind of struggling with the administrative / operational side of things. And there's a lot going on going into fundraising this year. It would be nice to have someone to get things organized. So general executive assistant type duties, light touch support at the executive level. The leadership team has made it very clear that they still want to own their calendars and those types of things. But this company does quite a few in-person events throughout the year. So someone to help with that kind of coordination, maybe finding venues, booking venues, hotel or like Airbnb type accommodations. A lot of people have also indicated that they still want to keep booking their own flights and things like that. So yeah, it's more going to be making sure that balls don't get dropped and keeping things organized as the firm goes into a very busy period. This would be a permanent full-time position, remote, located in Canada. Ideally, someone with venture capital, private equity, finance type background, and somebody who would be required to build systems from scratch. This is a net new role. So looking for someone to kind of take ownership of designing systems, processes, and that experience then would come in really handy. So that's kind of a bit of the background of the role. The role itself would report to the VP of People Operations, because it just feels a little bit more centralized, and because none of the executive team, the whole point of having this role is to take things off their plate, and so having another person to report to them is not ideal for anyone. Yeah.
That's interesting. So this is the job title is being branded as executive assistant, but from what I kind of pick out of what you described so far, this is kind of an operations coordinator type role. You know, that
Yeah.
skill set is going to be very important for, I think, the success of this role within the context of they're helping to make the business operate in a more streamlined, more effective way. You know, take off some of the itty bitty things of like organizing events, and you know, there's some stuff that's probably going to relate to expenses and travel, even if the team really wants to still maintain their own calendars and book their own travel. There's probably going to be a lot of supportive things there. So this might not be a traditional EA role. It might be a role where the person who's successful needs to think a lot more about how to process work and how to automate some stuff and how to not consolidate work and consolidate power, but make it more effective and efficient to run the current structures inside the context of that organization. So it's an interesting role for sure.
You make such a good point, because I think the as I was growing out the list of responsibilities and thinking about things like, what does success look like? What would the first 30, 60, 90 days look like? It occurred to me that this isn't a traditional executive assistant role. I also thought about project coordinator as well, like you said, ops coordinator, those kinds of titles. So I think that's the first thing, is really breaking down what is this title, and it has to be bang on, because it has to attract the right people for the role. We've talked in the past about, like, right job posting for the candidate pool that you're trying to attract, and it would be a huge missed opportunity to miss out on ops coordinators or project coordinators, project management coordinators, because they looked at the title and it said executive assistant. They're like, that's not me. That's not what I want to do. So that's a really, really good point. The first and foremost thing here is, what is the job title?
It might be interesting too to test out multiple job titles with essentially the same post, right? Because we've talked on the show before about how certain titles and certain terms can very much code to certain particular groups of people. And if you think about that coding, like we did an episode with an executive assistant role, executive assistant plus office manager role. Right. And we talked a lot about the kind of gender specific coding that was inherent in that title. So with going with an executive assistant here, you might actually find that the same dynamics are in play. So it could be really interesting to test different job titles and see what you get.
That is such a great suggestion. I love that. And even if the body of, this is something that we'll get into too, as well, is that the body of the job posting might have to vary a little bit based on those job titles. But you're absolutely right. It's a great opportunity to see what comes back. I'm interested in doing that. So I'll definitely have to play around with it. So the job posting, maybe I'll just go through what I have right now.
Yeah, why don't we start with the structure of the job post? And for the folks at home, we're going to put a copy of this job post up on Google Drive like we normally do, and we'll put a link to everything in the show notes, so you hit the episode landing page and you can kind of see what we're talking about here in writing and follow along if you want. But why don't we start with the structure? What are the different sections of the role in order? And what's your thinking behind that structure? Let's start there, and we'll just kind of peel back the layers of the onion a little bit as we go.
Absolutely. So the structure begins with about the company. And again, important thing to know, who is this company? What are they doing? What are they all about? Goes into the role. So a brief summary of the role itself, key responsibilities. Then we have reporting structure, location and work environment, what we're looking for, aka qualifications, and compensation and benefits. Then we go into the hiring process, so what the candidate can expect. Then we have our AI disclosure, and then a note on accommodations. That's the basic structure. My issue is that I want to provide as much information as possible. It starts to get really long. That's where I'm concerned. Now, I don't know, that might not be an issue for people. That just might be me worrying that it's too long. I think the more information, the better. We talk about this a lot, when we talk about listing out your benefits and being specific, well, that takes up a lot of space as well. When you add what the hiring process is, that also takes up some space. So I could be thinking that something is a problem when it's really not. And when I say too long, we're at 4 pages on a Google Doc. So that's long at a 12-point font. So that's long.
I have a bit of a pedantic question to start with.
Mhm.
So in your structure that you've outlined, you have the section about the company, the hiring company, as your first section. Why did you choose to put this at the start of the job post versus at the end? Because we look at a lot of job posts, job ads, where the employer branding is kind of tacked on at the end. Why did you put it first?
I think because this specific organization I had mentioned there, it's a lot about impact investing, and I think that needs to be really important to the candidate.
Mm,
For the type of people that we attract to the organization, are folks who care about the mission. And the mission is quite unique. Without going into too much detail, it is a very, very unique mission. Yes, the work itself, venture capital, whatever, very common, but it's the type of investments that are being made. And so that's one reason why I really want to make sure that that connects with the applicants. The other reason why is I'm trying not to give too much detail here, but the job posting is hoping to attract a specific person in a specific demographic. So not just mission driven, but some diversity would be appreciated here.
mm,
And it says so. It actually says so in the job posting somewhere. So instead of me trying to make up the language, why don't I just tell you what it says? Um,
mhm,
we strongly encourage applications from Indigenous professionals and value lived experience alongside professional experience. Also, experience working within Indigenous organizations, communities, or initiatives is considered a strong asset. So that's part of the reason why I put about the company at the very beginning, because right off the bat, if somebody can identify with that, then we will have captured their attention. And also, for those who might not be interested in that, unfortunately, we live in a world where that might be a deterrent for some people. And so naming it right off the bat to me is a filter.
mhm. Yep. Yep. It's a bi-directional filter to kind of have that stuff out there. And what I kind of like about your explanation and what I've seen, I'm just kind of skimming through the job post now. What I kind of see is you're taking that mission-driven kind of purpose and anchor it. And like you're anchoring it to the very top of the role, so that, like you said, someone who it really resonates with, like it's going to be front and center, and hopefully get them a little bit engaged and excited to continue on with the role. So let's keep on going through this. The next section that you have after the employer branding part, the about the company part, is the role itself. So you've got the role, the key responsibilities. Let's start there. When to read off the role, and we'll kind of get into that.
Sure. The executive assistant role is a newly created position that comes at a pivotal moment for this company. We are intentionally designing this position to act as a central coordination point across leadership, fundraising, and internal operations. And there's that word that you mentioned again, operations.
Hmm.
Sometimes we need a second set of eyes, right? To be like, it's very obviously speaking to operations. So, yes. As such, you will help shape how the position evolves, influence systems and workflows early, and play a meaningful part in building this company's next phase of growth. So that's a describer of the role. Curious as to, what you think might be missing here. Yeah, red flags, green flags, beige flags. Or do you want me to go into responsibilities first?
Well, let's pause here and just talk about that section for a little bit. So you teased out that this, you used the word operations, and we talked about that a little bit at the start, where it was like, this really seems like an operations and systems type role. The thing that's popping up for me right now is, perhaps, are you going to do yourself a disservice by branding this as executive assistant? Are
Yeah.
you going to inadvertently screen out or filter out people who they don't even click into the job role? They just see that big list of LinkedIn jobs, and it's like, this company is hiring an EA. Are they going to just be like, "Nah, I'm not an EA, see you later"? when perhaps they are an operations professional and they really would dig this job, but they skip that part. Like, I wonder, maybe you're going to do yourself a disservice through that kind of dynamic.
And on the flip side of that, we've talked about how EA roles, when they're posted, you are going to get thousands of applicants because, again, it's perceived as a lower barrier to entry type role. And so any kind of administrative type role, you're going to see so many applicants that it's almost overwhelming. And so I think that you're right. It'll either get folks who are like ops coordinator type roles not interested in it, or have a lot of the wrong type of applicants. So yeah, I think you're right. I think the biggest thing here is whether or not this is the correct title for the role.
And you also, we talked about AI a little bit. You have an AI disclosure, and we're just kind of jumping ahead a little bit, folks. Sorry, but the AI disclosures is basically, we don't use AI in the screening or the hiring process. Your interview is looked at, or your application is looked at by people, and you'll be talking to people in the interview. It's a very human-centric process that you outline in that disclosure statement. But that's great. I personally love that. I don't like automated systems that are poorly designed in the hiring process. But combined with, you're going to get a ton of applications because of the perception of a low barrier role. Are you inadvertently perhaps putting like a screwdriver in the lock to the dike, and is it going to burst open and flood you with stuff that you can't possibly get through? Too many applications. Maybe that'll happen. Those two things together.
Maybe that'll happen. And I don't know if we want to go into that a little bit now. We might as well. This is kind of an experimental structure right now that we're working with.
We're free-forming it.
This is a good question. So when you say that, like for this organization, there is no applicant tracking software or anything like that. So it is old school, like submit via email. So
you're going to be running this process on spreadsheets.
Absolutely. Running the process on spreadsheets. I am okay with that personally, because one, I have the bandwidth, and two, I have the desire to almost case study this process as well. I've, early days spreadsheet style, and then midpoint career, lots of applicant tracking systems, lots of ATS. And this is kind of going back to the basics, because I really want to understand the difference in the process. So yes, overwhelmed, absolutely. But there is a bit of a plan. There is a bit of method to the madness, and it is posting it short term. Post it, keep it up for just a few days, and then pause it or take it down, and then assess and repost if needed, to be able to handle the influx of applications. I also wonder whether or not that's actually going to be true in this case. Like I said, it's a very specific candidate that we're looking for. It's a very specific organization that might not necessarily attract everyone. And, for me, when I applied for the organization, I was hesitant. Because I didn't know that I was going to be the right person for the role, considering the organization itself. So I was very hesitant because I didn't want to take any missteps. I wanted to be really respectful of what the organization was trying to do. And so, yeah, it will be very, very interesting. My question for you is, how would you then leverage AI without having an ATS to manage this system, to manage the process?
That's a great question. I think that I would use AI in a kind of a knowledge generation role in a process. If it was me kind of starting this from scratch, so I would collect all of the applications. Hopefully they're all in a format that can be copy pasted, so that for someone who's thinking about building an AI assisted hiring process from scratch, like, you got to think about that part, because if the AI can't ingest the information, like if it's a PDF without the fonts embedded, if it's just like a bitmap or something, the AI system's not going to be able to read it. So I would perhaps feed all of the applications into an AI workspace that that had privacy controls embedded in it. Like there's, at least on ChatGPT, there's a setting where you can start a temporary session. And once you close the session, all of the information that you fed into it is erased. Like I would do that for sure, because you do not want PII, personally identifiable information, making its way into a training model. That's a no-no. Like it's a legal no-no. Maybe they won't find out. Probably they won't find out, but it's still an ethical no-no if they're not giving consent for that purpose.
And a shout out here to Paul and I, our friend over on Substack, Dr. Sam. Dr. Sam Illingworth talks about slow AI, and one of the things that he's always talking about is don't share anything in AI that you wouldn't want broadcasted on a billboard. So that's a good reminder. And you also remind me of something else too, like specifically working within Indigenous frameworks. There's also OCAD, and I'm not sure, or OCAP, sorry, OCAP and OCAD are two very different things. But basically, OCAP is the First Nations principles. They establish how that data that belongs to Indigenous First Nations peoples and communities, how the data and information will be collected, protected, used, and shared. And it's the principle and belief that that is their information. And so you actually have to be very, very mindful about that as well. And again, if we're looking to hire someone with that background, then even more so being mindful with the data, how you're using it, how you're storing it.
Yeah. Kind of a theme that's woven throughout the general data protection regulation is that consumers own PII. They own their data. And Denmark's taken that a step further by saying that a likeness is a copyright that is owned by the individual. So an individual person automatically has the copyright to their likeness, which really means that if you're planning on ingesting their likeness for training in an AI model, like you need to seek permission for that, and it has to be explicit permission. It can't be implicit permission. So concepts like that, they exist in other parts, of the world, and I think that generally policy is moving a lot in this direction. Now, back to how I would use AI in the hiring process. Like I mentioned that I would use it as kind of like a knowledge engine, and do a little bit of classification work for me. So I would feed the resumes into the system in a temporary chat, a private chat, that the information just gets deleted afterwards and isn't used in the model. And I would ask the system to come up with highlights from each resume that align with the job posting. So I would feed it the job posting too and be like, this is the job post, this is the organization, this is what I'm looking for. Create highlights for each of these resumes that that line up to that. And then I would use that information to guide my reading and exploration of the applications that are received. Like I wouldn't rely on that explicitly to kind of make the decisions for me, but I would use it to say, point me in the right direction. Because if you think about this in context, if you're going to get a couple hundred resumes throughout your hiring process, that can be pretty useful. Pretty big time saver. I might also use it to create a rubric or a matrix scoring people in different areas based on what they put in their applications. I might say, okay, I want this characteristic and this characteristic and this characteristic and this characteristic. That's stuff that people are going to be using all the time. So grade each application on a scale of 1 to 10 in each, and then just give me a table output summarizing the scoring in each. And again, I wouldn't use that personally as a decision-making engine, but I would use that as like a guidepost for me to kind of do my own analysis with my own eyes. That's what lines up with what you've said you want from like the hiring process. So that's my long-winded answer to your question.
No, that's great. That's super helpful. It's not that I haven't used it before in the past. I just feel like I said, this to be a little bit of an experiment potential, a bit of a case study, and could change. I wonder if then it is, because we also talked about, like, if you don't use AI, you don't necessarily have to say you don't use AI. But I wonder if maybe it's worth changing to, because right now it says, for those who don't know, we haven't actually read out that part. This company does not use artificial intelligence to screen, rank, or evaluate applications. All applications are reviewed by humans, and AI is not used as part of interviews or hiring decisions. I wonder if it maybe needs to be reworded that, because at the end of the day, it will still, the interviews, that part is true, hiring decisions, that part is true. Potentially then maybe in an application like you mentioned, to help sort things out. How would you change the wording of that? I'm putting you on the spot. This whole thing is putting Paul on the spot.
That's the point.
Getting
that's the point. Like,
free consulting work right now.
oh, I feel so exploited. Yeah, no, and for the listeners at home, like, this is definitely an experiment of Jen and I kind of co-designing a role together, and we figured we'd record it for the show to see if you folks could get something out of it too. So, how would I change that disclosure statement? I would word it in that scenario where I am going to use AI as a little bit of a guidepost enabler, like a supporting piece of technology. I would reword it to emphasize that AI and automation technologies will be used to help handle volume and to guide the assessment of applications. But then I would also very, very clearly lay out that each application will be reviewed by a person. There is no algorithmic screening in or screening out from an AI tool, and that all people will be treated equally and fairly. That those automation tools are really just to help manage the process and kind of make it more productive and efficient. I would probably also add a section to go along with the part on the AI disclosure. I would add a section outlining use and retention of PII, personally identifiable information. Because once we start getting into this use of technology to augment the hiring process, for some people, questions are going to come up around how their PII is used. So you might add like a sub kind of section or a rider or something to that disclosure saying, this is how we handle your PII. Like, your resume will be retained for, I don't know, 3 months, 6 months, whatever, whatever's kind of appropriate for this organization. This is how we'll use the information. These are the sub-processors of data. These are the tools that will be used that will have access to your data. And these are the conditions upon which they have access. And in that, I would call it very explicitly that your PII will not be retained within an AI system. It'll be operated on only within a private session and deleted from that system and not used in the training data. Like, I'd be kind of clear about that, because not everyone will think about stuff like that.
Yeah.
But for the people who do think about that, incredibly important. And you might inadvertently filter people out just by not being clear about how that PII is handled.
This is interesting. I'm taking notes just so for anyone like listening or,
Yeah, we really are co-designing this live.
this is happening live. I'm taking notes. But then I also get into the issue of, like we talked about, now we're at the bottom of page 4, right? So we can talk if we want to about how to perfectly design. I don't think either of us pretend that we could perfectly design a job posting, but roasting other job posts. But at the end of the day, this is great information. I, as a candidate, would want to know all the things that you talked about, especially about PII, especially in this kind of sector that we're talking about as well. And now it's becoming a novel. And so where is that fine line?
Yeah.
I think you could also point to, like, an easy solution off the top of my head is on your careers page on your website. You can direct people there to learn more about how we store data, blah, blah, blah. Go to this website. I think that makes the most sense. And it's a good way to give people access to make that information accessible without writing War and Peace in a job posting.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, if you're gonna like mimic Tolstoy's work or Dostoevsky or something, like, you don't want to do that in a job ad.
Exactly.
And we saw this recently in our episode about the barista for coffee shop. They took a pretty balanced approach by listing out like a bunch of stuff that was really good, but they also had extended information on their hiring website, on their special like website that's just for talent management and acquisition and whatever. So
Yeah.
you could look at taking an approach kind of similar to that, where all of the things that all of the sections, the information that's in the job post right now, the draft, it does make it into the final version of the job post, but in a truncated way. So you could play around with the ordering of the sections, like maybe your AI disclosure is one sentence, and it's like basically we use AI to support, but not to make decisions. There is no algorithmic screening involved in our process. Read more here, and then click on the link that goes out to the organization's website. Could just be a landing page or something that gets into more detail around sub-processors and of data, PII, and different things. Like you could give the full meat there for people who it's important to, and not impact the experience negatively for people who just don't give a damn.
Exactly. And because we talk about this a lot too, like it's not just like you have to design it for the masses and not just like specific, even though we say like know who your candidate pool is and try to attract them specifically, but also you don't want to isolate or alienate anyone else.
Yeah.
So we jumped all the way to the bottom. So let's go back to the role. So we talked about kind of a summary of the role. We talked about how it reads as operations coordinator, so much more so than executive assistant. What are your thoughts on naming that it's a newly created position, and why? And what that means. Do you think that this is something that should be included? Do you think it's too much unnecessary information? Does it matter?
I don't think it's unnecessary information. I'm not going to say it doesn't matter, but I do wonder how much it matters and why. If you think bigger picture, you think about the context. Like if you're seeking a professional who has done stuff like this before, who's built systems kind of from the ground up in a net new environment, that's a very different kind of task than it is to do change management on moving from like one system to another system. Like those are two different beasts entirely. So the person who's really serious about this, they're going to want to know. The person who's not really serious about this and hasn't really done it before, it's not going to make a difference to them. But this could be another point of filtering and selection that kind of makes it in and helps you improve the relevance of the role. I would personally keep it. I would say this is a net new role, and I would also say this is why that matters, and talk a little bit about the desired outcomes from that.
Absolutely. No, that's great. Let's get into the key responsibilities then.
Yeah, and the reporting structure too.
Yes. Should we go? We'll just keep going in order though. Role, key responsibilities, support leadership operations. There's that word again, by coordinating meetings, governance, workflows, and follow through across the team. Strengthen fundraising and investor operations by maintaining CRM integrity, managing materials and data rooms, and supporting LP, that's limited partners, communications and processes. Help drive strategic execution by maintaining project tracking systems, supporting cross-functional initiatives, and keeping priorities moving along. Coordinate travel, events, and firm logistics, including retreats, investor gatherings, and key organizational moments. Maintain organized, accessible knowledge systems, including document management, templates, and governance materials, and provide operational support across the ecosystem, but the company's ecosystem, by assisting with research, coordination, and internal reporting as needed. And so I'm going to stop there. A couple things that when we talk about read between the lines, there's a story being told here too. And I'm sure you've probably picked up on it, but the story is, and you'll see it with follow through, support leadership, follow through across the teams is one of them. Keeping priorities moving forward is another one. So you read things like that and you understand right away that there are roadblocks, there's bottlenecks. And so this role would help to ensure that the dams are open a little bit, that we can move things along, because some things, balls are getting dropped mostly administratively. And so again, like we said, time into the whole reason that we have this, that we're doing what we're doing with Roast the Post is so that you can read between the lines, that you understand the story that the job posting is telling you. So to me, what this is saying, dancing around without naming it, is that you're going to have to nudge people a lot. You're going to have to say, hey, don't forget to sign those papers. Hey, don't forget to reply to that message, right? It's going to be a lot of that, AKA what we like to call herding cats.
That's exactly the phrase that was in my mind as you were reading that. Like, you know, and I say this in the nicest way possible, but that really means you're gonna herd some cats.
Yep.
Now, the question for a really on point, intelligent person who is successful in getting this role, the question for them is, how much of the cat herding is going to be done by you manually, through follow-ups and messages and emails and whatever, and how much can you automate? What are the systems that you can bring to bear to make that process of cat herding run at least partly without your direct intervention? That's going to make the overall system much more kind of functional and efficient.
Absolutely. And I think too, one of the things is to understand that that is the nature of roles like this. When you're going to get executive assistant, operations coordinator type roles, like this isn't, to me, this isn't a red flag, because it is the nature of the role. But like you said, trying to automate, how can you make this less of a nudging role, and give people the, I guess this role should be empowering people to be able to do the things that are creating, like eliminate the bottlenecks and things like that, passively, even without them having to have a big lift. So yeah, absolutely agree.
Yeah, the purpose of technology at the end of the day is to augment the capabilities of humans.
Yep.
Doesn't matter what piece of technology it is, doesn't matter how it's deployed, where it's deployed. The purpose is to augment the capability of humans. Sometimes that means less humans are needed. Sometimes it means that humans can do more. And in a kinder organization that really focuses on people, you really want it to be the latter, right? One thing did stand out for me in that section that I would call a pink flag. It's not red, it's not beige, it's pink. Acronyms.
Yes.
CRM and LP are familiar acronyms to both of us. Customer relationship management system and limited partner. But you are going to want to cast your net outside of the group of people who are, you know, they're everyday familiar with those acronyms. So always write it out the first time that it comes in the job posting. You know, write out customer relationship management in brackets CRM, write out limited partner in brackets LP. And then after that, it's fine to use the acronym because you've grounded that knowledge. So tip for the folks at home, when you're writing your own job ads, like always write it out in full first, put the acronyms in brackets, and then refer to it in the acronym form if you want throughout your post as kind of relevant.
Absolutely. I mean, we've talked about this many times, and this is why Roast the Post is so important, because like everyone has blind spots. Everybody forgets. Everybody goes into autopilot and assumes that that the rest of the world understands whatever pattern language you use at your organization, and that's just not the case. That's just not the case. So I absolutely agree. And going back to something that you said earlier too about technology augmenting. I think that it might be worth noting somewhere in the job posting that this person will have the support from the organization to implement or new initiatives. Not just we want you to make us better at getting things done, but like if you have a software that you recommend or something, like it will more than likely be implemented. So for me, I guess it's important to know, it would be important to know as a candidate that you actually have a shot at being successful here. Like, we want you to be the subject matter expert. We trust your guidance and your recommendations. And so I think that that's something that could be named as well.
Yeah.
Like,
Put that in the key responsibilities for
yeah,
sure.
I don't
Yeah.
know the
Like
word.
I would add that, because that's going to attract, like, that's another great filter point. It's going to attract a particular type of person, and I'm that person really, who loves building things and loves figuring out how different operational processes and technology platforms can layer together throughout an organization to help increase the capacity to do good work. People who are wired like that, they're going to love that. And conversely, people who aren't really big on that, they're like, "Oh, I don't want to deal with the tech." Like, geez, come on. You're going
Yeah,
to filter them out, which is what you want. Even if this building kind of thing isn't the forever solution or the forever part of what their job, it's going to be a big part of it, probably for a year.
absolutely. You're right. And there's some organizations where you enter the org and you have to prove yourself. You have to build that trust. They don't just trust you right out of the gates, which is weird to me, because like, you're hiring that person for their
Mhm.
expertise. This isn't that kind of place. And so to translate that, I think would be really important, that like, from what, and maybe that comes across in the interview, who knows. But I think it's important for candidates to know that that trust is given from the moment you walk in the door. um
That's another thing that probably belongs in here. You're right. Like, talking about talking about agency and autonomy,
yeah,
is going to that's another filter point that will probably be pretty important, because you're going to attract people, or at least build kind of bonus points with people who are like, if I have to sit through another micromanaging
yeah,
experience with two directors, I'm just going to like lose my nuggets and quit after a week.
yeah,
Conversely, people who are like, ooh, I need structure. I need like a task list, and I need 20 things to do, and I can't be the person coming up with that. People who are like that, they're going to read autonomy and agency and be like, maybe this isn't for me. I'm not the best at coming up with the plan and then implementing the plan.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just making some notes, adding that to kind of the summary of the rule, because the role, because I do think it's important. That's it really for the key responsibilities. An earlier version of this job posting, I had it by section, like departmental, it just became too much. That's for an internal role profile. It does not need
Mm.
to be included in the job posting. I think the person gets the gist of it. But yeah, it would then be way beyond the 4.5 pages that we're already at.
Let's let's that's a good segue into talking about the reporting structure section that
Yeah.
you've got in the job ad. So why don't you read that one out, and then we'll talk about that. Like, I think I'm a big fan of having the reporting structure in the job ad. I think it provides great context, but let's get into that a little bit.
Absolutely. Reporting structure. While this role reports to the VP People Operations, and in brackets, the person's name, for structure, guidance, and people leadership, it is not dedicated to supporting a single individual. The executive assistant works in partnership with the full leadership team and collaborates closely with members across the organization to support firm-wide operations and coordination. Your manager's management style emphasizes, it's written better than
Mm.
that. Management style emphasizes clarity, autonomy, and proactive communication. You will be encouraged to work independently, build relationships across the organization, and take initiative in moving work forward. If you are unsure about something, you are expected to ask questions early rather than make assumptions. Your manager values thoughtful problem solving, empathy, and flexibility within clear expectations, and provides consistent support and context so you can operate with confidence and ownership. So that's the reporting structure. That's long. I know that there's a lot there, but we've talked about it before in other job postings. I want reporting structure is important. You understand
Mhm.
kind of where it sits. Wondering from your perspective if that's enough, though. So it's saying you're reporting to this person. Um, how far do you think it should go? Are you reporting this person who is part of the leadership team, the executive leadership team? That needs to be stated, do you think? And then for me, it's important for the person to understand the management style.
Yeah.
If you go into it expecting it's going to be one thing and then it's something else, or you have a good idea of whether or not you mesh with that kind of, so you need clear guidance, that might not happen, but also understanding that yes, you have a certain level of autonomy, but if you are in doubt, please ask questions first. That's that kind of situation. So yeah, curious of your thoughts on that section, reporting structure.
I really like this. I'm on the same camp that I prefer to have the reporting structure in job ads.
Yeah.
At the very least, like the title of the person you're reporting to, and some sense of their, and it really kind of boils down to getting a sense of the overall authority that
Yes.
your direct manager or direct supervisor has within the organization. That's the kind of meat of the issue that you want to communicate in a job post. What I really liked about this, though, was it talked about the management style and kind of professional personality and values of the direct supervisor. That's not something that is in a job ad that I've ever read, and we definitely haven't roasted a job ad that has something like in this. I think it's a really valuable addition, though. Could it be shorter? Maybe. Maybe it could be a little bit shorter. Like that is a lot, but it's commensurate to the importance. I think of the context that's important to a person making a decision about whether or not they're going to apply for this role, and if they'll be successful in this role. That's kind of the next leap, because we don't write job ads to fill seats. We write job ads to fill seats for a long period of time. If we write job ads that fill a seat for a week,
Exactly. And I know that there might be an argument against kind of naming that person and being so specific to their style, because that could change, right? Like maybe
Mhm.
in larger organizations or higher turnover, it could be, well, 2 weeks ago that was going to be your manager, but they've since moved on or whatever. So I can see an argument against it, and to say maybe it's more about overall the organization, how things are managed. It's less tied
Yeah.
to like the specificity, oh my gosh, of the individual itself, right? That doesn't really make it long lasting.
Yeah.
So I understand that, and curious to hear your thoughts on that as well.
There,
In this
there's
situation, that's not going to be the case, but I know that to be true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This also surfaces another thing that can be an important filter point for job ads. Uh, is the person that you're looking for a big organization person or a small organization person? And
Mhm.
I've often thought about my own career and the nature of work that I found the most fulfilling. And what I figured out a long time ago is that I'm not a cog on the corporate machine. And if I'm in
Yeah.
those environments, like, I turn to mush pretty quick. And there are tons of people like that. But on the other side of it, there are people who really kind of need the structure and the rigidity provided by large organizations. So perhaps there's a filter point here that you can add that really kind of connects the dots on, this is a small organization, and this is why we're talking about the management style in the context of that small organization. Maybe that's a framing point that would really kind
Yeah.
of enhance this a little bit.
Um, I'm just making some notes here. It's a good point, and I'm the same way. Like I feel like in a large organization, especially a corporate environment, I lose so much of myself. I feel like I don't even know who I am. It irks me when companies say you can bring your whole self to work, because I never believe that that's true. But I
Mhm.
think it's true to a certain extent. And in a smaller organization, I absolutely feel like I can be more of myself than in a large corporation. Absolutely, absolutely. And it's true. Like you can see if you're posting a job on LinkedIn or something like that, it'll say like employee count or whatever, some kind of language like that. But like in a general job posting, if you're posting on Indeed or some other places, there's not a place to put employee
Mhm.
headcount. So it's hard to gauge. Is this a massive company? Or is this a small company? And that makes a huge difference. So I appreciate that. If there's no space to put it, then maybe like in the automated fields, then maybe adding it to the job description is a good idea.
Yeah, it could even go to that into that employer branding section, right? Like the about the company part.
Yeah.
You could even add just like a small statement being like, this is a small team, small organization, operates very, very closely knit, like something like that.
Yeah.
You could probably do what you need.
Absolutely.
Let's when you're done taking your note there, let's move on to the next section, the location and work environment section. Talk about that a little bit. It's short, and then we'll get into the what we're looking for section.
Yes, let's do it. Okay, so location and work environment, fully remote, Canada-based role. The company operates as a distributed team with regular virtual collaboration. Occasional in-person gatherings take place throughout the year. You must be able to travel between Canada and the United States.
Bit of a question mark right now, but okay.
Yep. Yeah. So I feel like that's enough information, but maybe it's not. Yeah.
I don't think there's anything missing here. I don't think there's anything missing. Like if there are, like we're talking about a remote role. It's fully remote. There's no expectation that you'll be in an office. But it might be, if there is some sort of framework where the team does come together at specific points of the year, like are there quarterly retreats, or is there an AGM that everybody attends, or something like that? It might be worthwhile putting that in here, because even with remote roles, like there are sometimes physical touch points, and just acknowledging that togetherness, being in the same room every once in a while is a part of the experience that can be useful for folks.
Yeah, and what those touch points look like. So next we have what we're looking for. We recognize that strong candidates may come from different backgrounds. If your experience aligns closely with the responsibilities of this role, we encourage you to apply. We strongly encourage applications from Indigenous professionals and value lived experience alongside professional expertise. Experience working within Indigenous organizations, communities, or initiatives is considered a strong asset. Experience supporting senior leaders in venture capital, private equity, finance, or professional services environment. Strong organizational judgment and comfort handling confidential information. Experience managing calendars, travel logistics, and executive priorities. Familiarity with CRM systems, project management tools, and collaborative platforms such as Google Workspace. Excellent written communication and ability to synthesize information clearly. Ability to work independently in a remote environment while staying highly collaborative.
Mm-hmm. That was pretty good too.
Wondering what your thoughts are on the tools, like actually listing out some of the tools, because the reason why I didn't is because I find job postings, say for example in HR, must have experience working with like Bamboo HR or Success or ADP Workforce Now. And to me, it's like, even if I haven't, I can learn that shit in 15 minutes. So to me, it doesn't matter what the actual tools are. And also because tools change, like we're migrating from Office 365 to Google. Phenomenal. I'm very excited about that. But so it doesn't matter. Those things change. It's not a big deal. I feel like anyone can learn any tool at this point.
That's a great point to bring up. This part of the kind of labor market, the hiring practices or whatever, has always really pissed me off. It bothered me, because tools can be learned. So if you're saying that, and there are some exceptions, like there are some very specialized tools and software packages that require significant training, and that's a part of the that's a part of the job. Like particularly in aerospace and machining, like I wouldn't hire somebody to operate a CNC rig and be like, no experience necessary. You have to have experience operating a CNC rig and the design software behind it. But general productivity stuff like this, it really bugs me when companies say you must have experience with Adobe X or Google Y or Microsoft Z, because those things can be learned. And when you're saying you must have experience, the other side of that coin is you're saying we're not willing to invest in your development and give you the time and the resources to learn our software. And
Yeah,
fundamentally, from a cultural standpoint, that's complete shit.
I agree. Yeah. One of the other things too that I didn't put is, you know, a 5+ years of experience or blah 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 blah. Because
Yeah, who cares?
who cares? And I worked at a company and I was there for 4 years and probably got 20 years of experience in those 4 years. Like it
Hmm.
really, to me, it does not matter. And so I didn't want anyone to think, oh, well, I don't have, 2 years in this sector or whatever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
really
There's also,
doesn't.
it doesn't, there's no educational requirement either. Because again, when we look at the candidates that we would like to see for this role, systemically, systemically and historically, there have been a lot of barriers for this group of people, marginalized communities.
Yep.
Always have more barriers. And so if somebody, doesn't matter to me if somebody went to school, it doesn't even matter to me if someone went to high school. I, I frankly do not care. There's so much more to people, and there's so many other ways to gain experience. And so that's why life experience is also taken into consideration here. We're not looking at like a regulatory role or anything like that either. So I wanted to make it obvious without making it explicit.
Hmm.
Hopefully that's captured there.
You might actually want to make that explicit.
You think
That
so?
would be with that context that you've given. I
Yeah.
would say that maybe you do want to make that explicit. That you're looking for a certain type of person with a certain set of background and skills, but you don't have an educational or an experiential requirement because of A, B, and C. That can strengthen both your employer brand and really appeal to some candidates who might fit that mold, but would otherwise perhaps ignore this job ad because they assume that
Yeah.
there's an educational or an experiential requirement and you just forgot to list it, because every company will use that proxy for capability, right? And at the end of the day, that's really what we're talking about. Like any time in any job that a company ever lists number of years of experience as a requirement or a particular type of education as a requirement, they're really using that as a proxy, as a crutch for evaluating the capabilities of the person. They're
Yeah.
really just kind of outsourcing that to a university or a college or another company. And they're saying, well, you've done this for 5 years and you have a degree from X, so you must be able to do it here. Like, and it is sound logic, but it's exclusionary and it's unnecessary. And some of the best people don't have those blends that you're looking for because you didn't think through what you actually need for the role.
Exactly. Absolutely agree. So no, you're right. I think naming it explicitly again without turning it into a novel is going to be
Yeah.
is fundamental. It is part of the employer branding too. And it's also part of like me in my role, what I would like to just do in this world, right?
Mhm.
Is lead by example in that sense. And so without naming explicitly, um, it's less obvious, it's less likely to happen. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah. There is a bit of a flip side risk to that, though. It's great that we're seeing in this, or not including those kind of proxies. Like I think that that's good, but the flip side risk again is volume of applications, and also how are you going to assess the capabilities of the person relative, or the applicant relative to what you need when they come in. That's something that if you want to take this approach and open it up, which is great, you also need to think about how you're going to assess those people and make sure that they can do the job. That could be a bit of a challenge, but if you crack that code, yeah, good
It's
for
going to work.
you.
It's interesting that you bring that up because we first met when we collaborated on something about hiring, like hiring for humans and our different
Yeah.
perspectives on hiring. And one of the things that I'd mentioned was like, if you ask generic questions, you're going to get generic answers. And so
Mhm.
to me, that really comes into play when we ask situational questions in the interview that are based on real, either past problems or situations in the organization or current. You know, a real example of this is what's happening, blah, blah, blah. You need to get this information. This person isn't responding. What do you do? Those kinds of questions, I think, will help to determine whether or not someone is right for the role. Absolutely. So yeah, it's a code to crack, but it's fun and it's interesting. And I think it makes a huge difference. Stop asking generic questions, get to the point, ask some
Yep.
questions you're going to deal with at your organization and understand their thought process. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the more in general, the more just talking about being less general and more specific. In general, folks at home, like the more that you can create a scenario which puts the candidate, like your short list of candidates, into the actual operating environment and gives them the context for what the job they'll be doing is like, the higher the probability that you're going to have a successful candidate for a longer period of time. You know, so it's a heck of a lot more extra work up front to build this stuff into your hiring process, but it pays dividends. And if you think about the costs of recruitment and the costs of training, and you very simply put together a spreadsheet that says, okay, if I hire this many people, this is the cost per head over the course of a year, it's this number. What if I can do better? What if I can reduce turnover by 5%? What's the cost benefit there? Like, you can start to put a business case to this extra investment if you really put your mind to it. And that's how you kind of build support inside an organization of people who really care about the numbers on the spreadsheet.
Absolutely, absolutely. Speaking of numbers, compensation, shall we? Compensation and benefits?
Yeah, let's talk about compensation. It's not fair for me to guess because I've already read what this post is offering, but let's get into that section. Yeah.
So what's mentioned here is compensation is location dependent within Canada and aligned with senior executive assistant roles in venture and private capital environments. So I wanted to name the thought process behind the salary range because I think it's important. Like, you can just throw out a range, but why? Why is it that range? Well, because it's aligned with similar roles in similar sectors, and the range is such because it depends on where this person is located. And I'm curious about your thoughts on that too. I like a location agnostic salary band, but at the same time,
It's unrealistic.
it's not realistic, and I don't have the authority to do that for this job. Not allowed. So the range for this job is 80 to 105 Canadian dollars. Thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
I like the location dependency part that we're talking about here, because you're basically telling a candidate, like, you know, if you live in Vancouver or you live in Toronto or you live in Montreal is kind of affordable in the larger cities relative to the others. But if you live in an urban environment where your living costs are higher, like, that's going to be factored into your offer. I quite like that. It's fair. There are limits to what you can do, obviously, with that, but at least this gives a sense of what's going into that calculation. And you also don't say in here that no negotiation, you get what you get, which is nice, because, like, salary and benefits, it should be a conversation when you're thinking about giving someone an offer or onboarding them. Like, to say this is what you get if you don't like it, like pound sand, that's kind of dumb.
Absolutely. And again, we understand why some companies do that, because they feel like some people may not have the negotiations. I totally understand that. Curious, and maybe this isn't the conversation, this isn't the day to have that conversation, but if you hire someone who lives in Toronto and you pay them more because of that, and then they move to a like dirt cheap small town of nowhere, what do you do?
I don't think that there's a whole heck of a lot that you can do. There are, to my knowledge, there are avenues where you can try and claw back, and usually that unfolds in the form of like a location dependency in the contract. Like, you must work in this geographic area, and if you move, you must seek permission to move, like to relocate and still have your job. And as a part of that process, there's usually a renegotiation. I've seen this with the big banks sometimes, where they fight really, really hard if you move to a cheaper location to pay you less. I this is a tough issue, because as like someone working, if I choose to move to a different area, I don't want to be making like 30% less. But the flip side of that is the organization factored in some of that stuff and agreed to pay you more to like fund your life. Is it fair for them to then kind of give you a raise based on you moving? I don't know. I can see both sides of that coin, but it's pretty it's pretty uncommon for that to happen and be like, hey, I'm moving from Toronto to Kitchener, so I'm going to make like 40% less. Like that doesn't happen. A company can't just say, okay, you're making less. Like, it doesn't work that way.
I agree. I really like what you said about how like you're hiring someone. Part of what you take into consideration is where they are located, whether candidates realize this or not. And so I think a good way around it is, like you said, just have something in the employment agreement that talks about if you move, the company needs a heads up, and it can lead to further discussion. And it's also part of the reason why I put location dependent. Compensation is location dependent. So that's the comp. Then we go into benefits, and it's categorized. And, I went into great detail because I always talk about going into detail. And maybe this is too much information. So let's see. Health and wellness, extended health benefits, including employee assistance program or EAP for you and your dependents through Group Source. $70 per month fitness allowance. So that would be like gym memberships or whatever. $1,500 per year wellness allowance. Time off and leave, 3 weeks of paid vacation to start, with additional vacation provided as tenure grows. 15 paid sick days per year. 8 paid personal days per calendar year. Paid time off during annual holiday closure. So that's like, Christmas, all that time.
Yeah.
Depending on how those dates fall, it could be a week, it could be even, I think last year it was 2 weeks, and that's paid time off, paid bereavement leave, paid maternity and parental leave. We're still going on benefits here. I'm just going to go through them and then we can kind of deep dive a little bit. Flexible statutory holidays. So statutory holidays vary across regions and traditions. At this company, employees have the option to substitute statutory holidays for the days that hold greater personal, cultural, or faith-based significance. And then professional growth and work environment. Up to $2,500 per year for professional development. Up to $250 per month reimbursement for a co-working or hot desk space. One-time $1,500 home office equipment allowance. And opportunity to contribute to an Indigenous-led investment platform with growing national and international reach. So that is under the section of compensation and benefits.
Yeah, I particularly like the flexible stat holidays thing. We've talked a little bit in some episodes in the past about inadvertently creating minor discontent through targeting a benefit to a very narrow specific group. And if you're not in that narrow specific group and you can't take advantage of that benefit, then it can lead to, kind of some negativity sometimes. And that it's really, I hadn't thought about holidays through that framework, that lens before, but it's kind of true. Like, every company gives people the statutory holidays that are a part of, kind of working in Canada, the US, or Europe, where we are. That's a part of the thing. But there are other holidays that are important to people. And it's like, if you're someone who is, not overly religious, and you don't celebrate like Ascension Day or whatever it is in March or April. I don't know. Like, I'm not at all religious. I'm practically an atheist. If you don't care about that stuff, or you do care about that stuff, but you're getting like Christmas Day off instead, it's like, well, what the heck? Like, a day off is a day off, sure. But the ability to say, like, all right, instead of this other day that I would normally get off, I will take this day off that truly matters to me and will kind of enhance my experience with family and friends in my community. that's a great perk. Like that could be a really important perk, and it's non-targeted. It's basically saying stuff that matters to you, you can swap it out. Cool. I think that's great. I think more companies should
Absolutely,
do that.
absolutely. It is, and it comes from a place of things like, say, for example, in an Indigenous-led organization, Canada Day isn't necessarily celebrated.
Yeah.
And so it's yeah, giving that that power back to the individuals to decide. Where it can go sideways, though, which we should talk about, is if, you know, some people practice the religion of the flying spaghetti monster, and there is a flying spaghetti monster day, right? Like where does it end? And are you asking people for any kind of, and the answer is no, but any kind of like verification of like, oh, all of a sudden I celebrate all of these holidays too, right? Like it can get out of control. It doesn't, I'm talking about worst case scenario, but it's just something to be mindful of for those who might be considering something like this. Is that, you know, it's an honor system, it's trust-based, it's relational, and it can work, but there will always be folks who try to take advantage of things like that. But you just have to give people the benefit of the doubt and maybe cross that bridge when you get to it.
I have absolutely no doubt that for the past like 10 or 15 seconds, you've been saying very, very intelligent things. But in my brain, I just have a picture of a dude with a colander on their head and spaghetti falling out the side. The whole concept of the flying spaghetti monster, like as an actual religion, just is wild to me. It makes me laugh so much.
Oh, absolutely. When we talked about this at work, actually, at a leadership team meeting, somebody mentioned that somebody had joked to them that they were a pastafarian. They celebrate pasta. And then yeah, the line that it goes down, when does it stop? Yeah, it's just interesting. My mind is going to this other conversation that was hilarious, but I won't bore everyone with the details. But yeah, I think it is nice. I think it's respectful. Not everyone celebrates the same holidays, but yet for some reason those are deemed the most important ones. So swapping out, if you want to work on Canada Day because you don't want to give it any energy, then, or participate in like Canada Day celebrations, then work Canada Day and then take an alternative day off. There's a whole policy around it, though, some guardrails. But yeah, it is a nice to have for sure.
The structure of this section is good. Like it's very simple. It's to the point. It's A, B, C, D, E. This is the number of things you get here. This is that. This is that. That was really well written. And in a section like this, that's all you need. Like you don't need to overcomplicate the health and wellness, time off and leave kind of section of your job ad. You just need to like list it out. You've done that here. That's good. 15 paid sick days per calendar year. I like that you listed out the number of paid sick days that people get. You know, some organizations have unlimited sick days, which I personally like better, but there is kind of an inherent risk there that will be abused. It's funny to talk about sick days with people in the Netherlands in particular, because their legislation around sick days is that employers must, it's basically if you get sick, you get sick, and employers must continue to pay your salary for up to 2 years. So like, there's no concept of like you get X number of sick days per year. And when you talk to Dutch folks about this and bring this up, they're invariably usually like, what are you talking about? When you're sick, you don't work. When you're not sick, you do work. Like, why are you complicating this?
Yes. And is that 2 years consecutively?
Yeah, so you can be and then that it sounds kind of crazy from our perspective here in Canada and in the US, because that's like, you know, your thoughts immediately go to like, oh my goodness, that is such a financial liability. That's crazy. But that means that there is no short-term and long-term disability insurance in the Netherlands. So those costs are not borne by the organization at all, because they don't exist. They don't. So I don't know what the numbers kind of play out as, but I would guess that like legal requirement is not as costly to companies as we might just assume, kind of off the top of our head here, because we're used to something different.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting to me. Yeah, I mean, 15 to me, 15 listing the numbers, it's high to me compared to what some other organizations, they'll do like the minimum ESA standard requirement,
Yeah.
and not do anything more than that. When you look at this, the paid time off, so we're saying 8 personal days, you're getting the annual closure, you're getting 15 sick days, 3 weeks of vacation. It's a lot. And what tends to happen in these situations is that you find people are using more of their alternative paid time off. So their sick days, their personal days, and everything, and not tapping into their vacation as much. And what that
Mm.
leaves you at the end of the year with is a lot of liability. So there's from a company's perspective, there's a fine line between being really generous. You want to be generous, you want to give a lot of PTO,
Yeah.
but that comes with liability. And so you have to balance that. You have to,
So
yeah.
that brings up a question for me. I don't think in your job description you talk about rollovers.
Yeah.
Is there a rollover policy? Because that's a common kind of way that companies use to limit their financial liability. They kind of make it explicitly clear in their contracts that any unused time at the end of a calendar year is forfeit. Like, is that just something that you do, but it wasn't mentioned here, or is that not at all, and you can roll
Yeah.
over forever?
There is rollover. There is rollover. My question is that the kind of, are we getting into the nitty gritty of that in a job posting? Or is
You're right,
that
probably not.
right? Is that handbook or policy? This is my
Yeah.
question just throughout all of our episodes, is like, when we ask for more information, is it more information for the sake of attracting someone to the position and giving them like an informed decision, or is
Mhm.
it information that should be, that is pertinent only to the successful candidate, right? And I
Good
don't know
point.
the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that. I've never seen, maybe I have, a job posting that mentions, vacation with X amount of rollover, because there's also rollover for the Pro D, professional development. It says
Mhm.
up to $2,500 per year, but we also allow a rollover so that people can kind of, if maybe it wasn't a year for them to do anything Pro D wise, they can
Mm.
roll over a certain amount to the next year. But at some point you have to cap that too. Does that need to be mentioned? I have no idea. Does it matter to a candidate? I
That's a
think
good
knowing
point.
that there even is Pro D is the most important part to a candidate. But again, I don't know.
Yeah, the draw is certainly that it exists, and putting the
Yes.
number to it is also important. I think probably you're right. Like, you don't need to mention rollovers at this stage. Like, maybe it would be useful to have like a blanket statement that some things can be rolled over. I don't know. How much do people care about that? Like, at this stage, probably not a whole lot, because it's
Yeah.
not widely talked about. Like, I have seen a vacation rollover policy referenced the
Mm,
odd time
yeah.
in a job ad, but it's certainly not like everything everywhere. It's not like a mainstream thing, so maybe it doesn't matter.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and yeah, that was it for comp and benefits. That was the full section.
Okay. Let's talk about the last section that we've got in here that we haven't covered yet. We didn't cover accommodations. I think we talked a little bit about accommodations. Like, you've got an accommodation statement in here, which is good. And I would assume that because it's you, like, it actually does mean something. It's not just like a throwaway statement.
Absolutely, but just like any job, there's a limit. That's why reasonable accommodation, like duty to accommodate, reasonable accommodation exists, right?
Mhm.
Like there's a limit. There's nothing in here though that talks about physical requirements,
Hmm.
which is interesting, because there isn't going to be heavy lifting, but it's something for me to consider, right? Are there any physical requirements? I'm just adding a note for myself. Because that's something that we talk about as well. Let's go to, accommodations. There's also know how to apply, which I made a note for myself. I realized as we were discussing that there's no mention of like, how do you apply for this job? Assuming
Yep.
it would be posted on LinkedIn or something, it's pretty self-explanatory, but I like to offer, and some people might hate this, alternative ways to apply. Not
Hmm.
everyone has LinkedIn either, and so there should be a direct way to apply. Maybe you need to make up an email address so that your inbox isn't inundated. I've done that in the
Yeah.
past too, careers at or whatever. But how to apply needs to be on there. So really the last part then is hiring process has
Mhm.
been added to this job posting. This is a bit long. Our hiring process is designed to be thoughtful, transparent, and reciprocal. We view interviews as a mutual opportunity to get to know one another and understand that you are assessing this company just as much as we are assessing you. Through our conversations, we're looking to understand your experience and readiness for the role, as well as your curiosity, willingness to learn, and openness to growth. You do not need to meet every requirement perfectly. What matters most is your ability to communicate clearly, collaborate thoughtfully, and bring a working
Mhm.
style that expands how we operate together. We value the ability to work efficiently across different communication styles, roles, and perspectives, while being clear about how you yourself show up. To support a fair and respectful process, we will share interview preparation materials in advance whenever possible. We aim to avoid surprises or gotcha moments. This role is first and foremost about collaboration, judgment, and communication. And that is what we prioritize throughout the process. We will also share feedback throughout the interview journey because we want you to succeed and genuinely hope you get the role. Our feedback approach reflects our culture. It is not meant to discourage, but to create a reciprocal process grounded in openness, growth, and clear communication. The process includes 2 structured interview rounds, followed by a final meet and greet conversation with members of the team. Hiring decisions are made collaboratively and with final decision authority held by the VP People Operations and the
Mm.
managing partner, informed by input from all interview participants. Our goal is to have this role filled by mid-April.
Mm.
This happens to me when I have to read too much in these podcast episodes. I get a tongue cramp, and I got a tongue cramp just reading that. So that tells me there's a lot of information there. It gets repetitive. It needs to be cleaned up. But in terms of the spirit and intent, very curious as to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, it's long. It's long. I would shorten that for sure. But the general thrust of it, I quite like. You're talking about the process, which is good. Like maybe that could be bullet points. You could kind of have a hybrid section where there's like a little bit of prose that kind of talks about the philosophy, and then there's just bullet points like, you know, interview round 1, interview round 2, decision made by X. I really liked that you in here put who has the decision-making authority. Now, the decision-making authority being split across 2 people, from
Mm.
a functional standpoint, I wonder about that. How is the decision going to get made? And is that going to introduce a barrier? Is that going to introduce complexity that might make the whole thing fall apart? Because sometimes in small organizations, people don't get hired not because they're unqualified, but because the internal process to make a decision breaks down. So I wonder if that's a risk with having joint authority here, but maybe it's a necessity. Maybe the boss needs to at least rubber stamp it. Don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question. In my perspective would be yes, final decision making authority is by those 2 individuals listed, but at the end of the day, this role reports into VP of People Operations, and so
Hmm.
VP of Operations makes the final call.
So
Yeah,
if that's actually the authority structure, I'd be clear about that.
yeah, yeah.
Because I'm sure there are other people who would be like, 2 people making a decision.
Yeah.
So yeah, that section though is good, because often the hiring process is a bit of a black box. Like candidates don't know
Yeah.
what that all looks like. So having it here is A, respectful, and B, it also helps them tailor their follow-ups. They know who to contact to say thank you to send that follow-up message. They know what the appropriate kind of structure for that is because they understand the process. I think that that's a good thing all in all, but could be shorter.
Could be shorter. Yeah, you're right. It's too long. For me as a candidate, I appreciate all of this information. As an organization trying to incorporate trauma-informed practices, not having
Mhm.
gotcha moments or surprises or blindsiding people is really, really important, especially for the types of candidates we hope to attract. So I think that's really important. I also don't believe in it in general, no matter who it is that you're trying to attract. Unless it's a role that requires gotcha moments, to me, it doesn't really mean a whole lot. And you can assess someone's ability to think on their feet during those situational questions as well. So yeah, I mean, that's it. We bounced around a little bit, but that's the gist of it. I feel like you gave, yeah, you gave some really good notes and feedback. I've taken lots of notes here and plan to do a full, not full, but a rewrite, trying to keep it a little bit shorter. When we look at it now, after we've made our notes and everything, it still reads at 4 pages. It's still very, very long. But I think with some editing, I can
Yeah.
shorten.
I mean, 4 pages, like, our kind of gut reaction is that that's long, but in the grand scheme of things, a 4-page document isn't that long,
Yeah,
especially when you put up the context behind that, reading this 4-page document might lead to an income of between 180 and 105,000 a year. That's not a lot to ask. And
yeah,
I think that it's the things that have been added in here that aren't common in the hiring process that support the candidate experience are quite good. So it's like, will you read a little bit more to get more into this and have a more informed kind of experience? Like, I don't think it's the end of the world. Like, I would read a 4-page document that was structured like this if I was looking for a job.
yeah, likewise. Yeah, same with me. So yeah, we will see how that goes. I will report back. And hey, maybe a future episode is the successful candidate comes on the show and we
That'd
interview
be
them,
fun.
talk about it. That would be really fun. Maybe I need to add that as a requirement for the job.
Must be comfortable talking on camera.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much for your help with this. I feel like we've successfully roasted this post.
Yeah, and for the folks at home, if you found this really useful, this format, let us know. Let us know. Like, it's something that maybe we could do in the future with other people who are writing job ads. We could do kind of a collaborative session and turn that into an episode too. So if you dug it, just tell us. If there is silence, we will just carry on with what we're doing.
Absolutely.
Thanks for riding shotgun with us on Roast the Post, the story behind the bullet points. If this episode helped you make sense of a messy job posting or just confirmed your instincts, go find that subscribe button and tap it. We're on YouTube and all the usual podcast apps, so follow us wherever you like to listen. And if you've seen a posting that made you raise an eyebrow, laugh, or seriously question the sanity of the hiring process, send it our way. Listener submissions are some of our favorites. Follow the link in the show notes for more. We'll be back next week with another post to roast.